She didn't cry when they threw her out. Not when the landlord banged on the door and shouted for the whole neighborhood to hear. Not when the eviction notice fluttered to the floor like a final insult. Not when she tried to explain and the woman upstairs slammed her window shut. She didn't cry when they walked out into the cold, with everything they owned stuffed into a torn grocery bag. And not when her son barefoot because his only shoes had holes looked up and asked, "Where will we sleep tonight, Mom?" She only cried later, at 2:14 a.m., when Leo was finally asleep under the bus stop bench, and she was holding his hand to remind herself that she still had something to protect. Anna had $4.26 in her pocket. She hadn't eaten since the day before. She didn't feel hunger anymore, just a growing ache of failure, hollow and constant. Like a hole inside her chest. She took off her coat, her only one, and gently wrapped it around Leo's legs. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. His cheeks were pink from the cold. He looked peaceful, too peaceful for someone sleeping on concrete. Anna watched him for a long time. She watched the way his small chest rose and fell. She tried to memorize the rhythm, like it could keep her sane. Then she turned her face toward the street and whispered to the night, "He deserves better than me." But the night didn't care. The rain had stopped hours ago, but her clothes were still damp. Her shoes squished when she shifted. A truck roared past, spraying mud across the sidewalk. No one stopped. She hated the city most at night, how quiet it was, how indifferent. In the daylight, at least, people pretended to see you. At night, she was invisible. She closed her eyes and tried not to think. Not of the past, not of the bakery that shut down, not of the landlord's voice, not of Leo's birthday last week, when she made him a cake out of 2 slices of white bread and strawberry jam. She tried to think only of the next hour, and then the next, and then, maybe, tomorrow. Morning came without mercy, not with sunshine, but with a thin, gray light that made everything look sadder, more tired. Anna sat upright before Leo woke, brushing the dirt from his hoodie with hands that trembled slightly from the cold. She didn't want him to see how swollen her eyes were, or how broken her body felt from a night on concrete. She kissed his forehead softly. "Let's go find breakfast," she said with a voice too cheerful for someone who hadn't slept. They walked for 30 minutes in silence before she found the public restroom behind a gas station. She told Leo to wait outside, then locked herself in and splashed water on her face like it could wash off the weight of being unwanted. In the mirror, she saw someone she didn't recognize. Messy hair, dull skin, clothes still damp. But what struck her most wasn't how tired she looked. It was how forgettable. She stepped out with a forced smile. Leo, ever obedient, never asked what was next. He just held her hand and followed. At 10:43 a.m., Anna saw a paper taped to the window of an old brick building. Hiring evening cleaner. Apply inside. She paused. The sign might as well have said desperate people only. No benefits, no security, no name on the door. Just a job nobody wanted. She looked down at Leo, who gave a tired half smile. "It's work, right?" Anna walked in, The woman behind the desk didn't even ask her name, just handed her a mop and a faded uniform and said, "If you don't quit by the end of the week, you're hired." That night, Anna scrubbed floors until her knees ached. She cleaned sinks that hadn't been wiped in weeks, toilets that smelled like resentment, desks that still held the fingerprints of people who never once looked her in the eye. No one said hello. No one said thank you. She was invisible again. But when her shift ended at midnight, she walked back to the bus stop where Leo was waiting, his arms wrapped around their grocery bag like a pillow, and she said, "We made it through today. That's all we needed." He smiled. Anna smiled back, and for one brief moment, she almost believed that would be enough. The school was nicer than most. Old brick walls, tall windows, a small patch of grass in the front yard that someone watered just enough to keep it green. It looked respectable from the outside, clean, polished, maybe even warm. But on the inside, it was just like every other place Anna had worked. Busy people with clipped voices, fluorescent lights that made your skin look gray, and the constant quiet pressure of knowing you didn't belong. Leo had to transfer there when they lost their apartment near his old school. It wasn't a choice. It was walking distance from the shelter they were staying in, and that was enough. On his first day, he wore a shirt one size too big and shoes that flapped a little when he ran. He kept his head down, tried to smile just enough to seem friendly, but not enough to draw attention. He sat in the back of the classroom, right next to the window. He liked the window. It gave him somewhere to look when the kids in the front row talked about their iPads. All weekend vacations. During lunch, he didn't eat. He pulled out a book instead, one he'd already read twice because it made him look busy. Not hungry, but kids notice. They always do. "Hey, why don't you ever bring food? You on a diet or something? Your mom too poor to pack you a sandwich?" He didn't answer. He just turned the page. Even though his eyes weren't really reading, he didn't tell Anna what they said. She was already doing too much working nights, dragging herself home in the early hours, standing in food pantry lines. She smiled less now. Her laugh, once loud and real, had become something tight in her throat. Saved for Leo and no one else. So he stayed quiet. He drank water from the fountain and chewed gum when he could find it. And he kept studying, always, because Leo believed something she had forgotten, that getting good grades might change everything. He wrote essays with too much heart, answered math problems like they were puzzles he was born to solve. And in the margins of his notebook, he scribbled tiny drawings of cakes and bakeries' blueprints for dreams he thought might someday belong to them both. Sometimes, when Anna came home from her shift, she'd find him asleep at the table, pencil still in hand. She never woke him. She just stood there, watching, one hand pressed to her chest, as if holding in all the things she didn't know how to say. He was the best thing she'd ever made, and she was terrified the world would break him the way it had broken her. Anna had always known there would come a day when her son would feel ashamed of her. She hoped it would be later, maybe when he was older, when teenage pride kicked in and children thought their parents were relics to be hidden. Not held, but shame, it turned out, didn't wait for adolescence. It crept in early, uninvited, disguised as silence, and sat between them at the dinner table when she was too tired to ask about his day. She didn't blame Leo. He had been carrying too much for far too long. A child who understood rent, hunger, and the word overdue before he fully understood multiplication. A boy who had to learn what dignity meant not by living it, but by watching his mother lose pieces of hers, one mop stroke at a time. It was a Monday morning when it happened. Anna had just finished her overnight shift cleaning the administrative wing of the school. The work was hard, as always, the kind that broke your back slowly and your heart quickly. She'd wiped down windows that would be smudged again in 2 hours, cleaned toilets no one flushed properly, picked up candy wrappers from students who didn't even notice her existence. The bell hadn't rung yet when she passed by the main hallway and saw a large poster taped to the wall. It was colorful, covered in smiling stick figure families, and in bold letters. It read, Parent Volunteer Day, when Diana stared at it longer than she meant to. She had heard teachers mention it in passing, but she hadn't thought much of it. Her first instinct was to smile. She imagined showing up in something other than her uniform, bringing in muffins she'd saved for, helping with crafts or reading time. Watching Leo's face light up when he saw her. For just one day, maybe she could be a regular mom. A mom who fit in. She went home to the shelter that morning and tried to act normal. Leo was already awake, dressed and packing his old backpack. He had one working zipper left on it, and every time he opened it, it sounded like a sigh. Anna handed him a small container of rice and beans. It's still warm, she said, even though she had reheated it twice already in the microwave with the broken turntable. Leo smiled as he took it. He never complained about food. He never asked for more. That quietness had started to worry her. Hey, she said gently, Wednesday is Parent Day. You want me to come? He paused just for a second. Not long enough for most people to notice, but Anna wasn't most people. She had memorized her son's face the way a starving man memorizes the last piece of bread. You don't have to, he said. You work. She looked at him. Really looked. He didn't meet her eyes, and that told her everything. She nodded slowly and said nothing. He gave her a quick hug, light and hollow, and left for school. Anna stood by the door long after it closed. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every voice in her head screamed something different. One said, You're embarrassing him. Another said, You deserve to be there. The loudest voice of all said nothing, just played Leo's silence on repeat. But she still woke up early Wednesday. She still packed a small box of muffins she bought from a discount bin 2 nights before. She brushed her hair and wore the cleanest shirt she had. She didn't have much, but she had effort, and she hoped, deep down, that maybe Leo would see that she arrived just after the morning bell, slipping in through the side entrance like she always did. The hallways were louder than usual. Laughter, footsteps, the clatter of coffee cups, and PTA moms in bright scarves chatting like they ran the place. She kept her head down, clutching the box of muffins. Her uniform felt tighter somehow, even though it fit the same as always. Her name tag on her. Night crew felt like a label meant to shame her. She approached Leo's classroom slowly. The door was open. She could hear the teacher introducing the day's activities. Students were giggling, passing notes. Already high on sugar from morning donuts, she peeked through the window in the door and saw Leo. He was sitting in the back, staring down at his desk. His shoulders were stiff. His backpack lay at his feet, fraying at the edges. She waited, hoping he would look up, hoping he would see her, hoping there would be even a flicker of that little boy who used to run into her arms after school. But he didn't look up, not when she stepped into the doorway, not when a girl near the front elbowed her friend and whispered, "Isn't that the janitor lady?" Not when another boy smirked and said, "Why would a janitor be here for Parent Day?" Anna felt all their eyes turn to her, little stares like needles in her skin. She took one step forward, just one. Leo didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't acknowledge her at all. The teacher, sensing something shift in the room, walked over quickly. "Hi there," she said kindly. "Can I help you?" Anna opened her mouth, but her throat was dry. Her heart was louder than her voice. She wanted to say, "I'm Leo's mother." She wanted to say, "I brought muffins." She wanted to say, "I have every right to be here." But instead, she whispered, "Sorry, wrong room." And she turned around. The hallway felt twice as long walking back. Her shoes squeaked. Her box of muffins felt heavier with every step. She went to the janitor's closet and shut the door behind her, sat on an overturned bucket and stared at the floor she had mopped just hours ago. She didn't cry. Not yet. Not until she got back to the shelter that night and found Leo already in bed. Pretending to be asleep, she sat down beside him and waited. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "I stopped by your class today." He didn't move. "You didn't look up." Still nothing. "I understand," she said softly. "It's okay." Leo turned slowly. His eyes were wide, wet. "I didn't mean to ignore you," he whispered. I didn't want them to laugh at you, or at me. I didn't know what to do." Anna looked at him for a long time. "It's okay to be scared," she said. "But don't ever be scared of me." He nodded, a small one. Then he reached for her hand under the blanket, held it tight, and they didn't say anything else. That night, she lay awake again. But it wasn't guilt that kept her up. It was resolve. Because she realized something important. Leo was ashamed, not of her work, but of what the world made her believe about herself, about how invisibility had crept into every corner of her life. And she decided that somehow she would change that. Maybe not today, maybe not even this year, but someday she would give him something to be proud of. And more importantly, she would start seeing herself as worthy of it. The day Anna collapsed, no one noticed. The hallway she'd just mopped still glistened under the flickering light bulbs. Her bucket sat beside her, half full, the water dark and soured. The mop handle leaned against the wall like a tired soldier, and Anna lay curled on the floor of the girls' restroom. one hand clenched into a fist and the other pressed to her side, as if she could hold herself together long enough to finish the job. She had felt it coming for weeks. The dizzy spells, the chest pain, the sudden weakness in her legs that made stairs feel like cliffs. But she pushed through them like she pushed through everything else quietly, with the resolve of someone who no longer believed her health mattered if the rent was late. That day had been long, cruel in its quietness. It had rained again, cold and hard. The kind of rain that makes everything ache. She'd worked double shift to cover for the new girl who quit after just 3 days. Her knees throbbed. Her hands were raw. Her shoes were soaked through. And yet, she didn't complain. Not to anyone. Because people like Honor didn't get sick days. They didn't get to rest. So when she felt her vision tilt and the floor rise to meet her, she didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She just sat down right there on the cold tileland, let her body fold forward like a napkin. No one came. Not for 5 minutes. Not for 10. Not for 20. She thought about her son. Not in some poetic way, but in a simple, immediate panic. He'll be waiting. Leo was always waiting. Waiting for her outside the shelter at 1:30 a.m., huddled in the thin coat that barely covered his wrists. Waiting at the cafeteria for the lunch lady to give him whatever was left. Waiting for his mother to finish her invisible job so they could go home to their invisible life. She reached into her pocket for her phone. Her fingers shook. The screen was cracked, stained. She couldn't see the numbers clearly, but she dialed anyway. The call didn't go through. No signal in the school bathroom. Of course. Her head slumped against the stall wall. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. The smell of bleach filled her lungs, sharp and bitter. And for a moment she thought, what if this is how I go? Not in a hospital, not in a bed, but on a floor I just cleaned, next to a toilet I scrubbed for people who never remembered my name. Would Leo even know where to find her? Would anyone tell him? Would they care? That thought stung the most. Eventually, the door creaked open. Someone stepped inside. A teacher, maybe, or a student. Their heels clicked against the tile, paused, then turned back toward the hallway. They didn't see her. Or they pretended not to. She wasn't sure which was worse. When she finally managed to stand, her legs shook like they belonged to someone else. Her breath was shallow, her vision blurred. But she made it to the sink, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection. Her lips were pale, her eyes sunken. There was a smear of blood on her collar from where her gums had split. But what frightened her most wasn't how broken she looked. It was how familiar that face had become. She used to look alive. Now she just looked like someone who cleaned up after people. She walked home that night slower than usual. Leo was waiting on the steps of the shelter, a book in his lap, pretending to read under a street lamp that buzzed and flickered. When he saw her, he stood up quickly. "You're late." She smiled like it didn't hurt. "Extra work." He looked at her longer than usual. "You're pale." "You're handsome," she countered, ruffling his hair. "We can't both be perfect." He didn't laugh. That night, As they sat across from each other eating dry cereal soaked in warm water, Leo finally asked the question he'd been holding in his chest for weeks. "What happens if you get sick?" Anna stirred her spoon. "I won't. But if you do, what happens to me?" She met his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't lie. "I don't know." Leo blinked, but didn't look away. "I could get a job. You're 9. So," Anna smiled, a small, broken thing. "So your job is to be 9. Mine is to make sure you don't have to grow up too fast, too late." That hit her harder than any fall. She reached across the table, took his hand in hers. "I'm not going anywhere, okay?" He didn't answer. He didn't believe her, and she didn't blame him. That night, she lay awake again, but not with guilt or pain this time. It was fear. Real, suffocating. Fear, the kind that builds behind your ribs and makes it hard to breathe. She knew her body was failing. She knew that collapse wasn't the last, just the first. She had to find a way out. Not just out of the janitor closet, not just out of the bathroom, where she almost died alone. She needed out of this life. She didn't know how, but she knew why. Leo. Always Leo. And that was enough to start. Anna didn't notice the flyer until the wind blew it right into her face. It was late February. The kind of cold that clings to your spine and makes you cough without being sick. She was walking to the shelter after another 14-hour shift when the wind lifted a torn paper off a telephone pole and smacked it against her chest. She pulled it off, ready to toss it aside. But then she read the words printed in crooked block letters. "Community Craft Fair. Vendors welcome. No fee. Bring what you make." She stared at it for a long moment. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, and the ink was smudged from rain. But the words stayed with her all the way back to the shelter. That night, she sat across from Leo, stirring a bowl of canned soup, and reread the flyer until she could see it behind her eyelids. Leo kept glancing at her. "You okay, Mom?" She nodded slowly, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I used to bake," she said softly. Leo tilted his head. "I know. No, I mean really bake. Not like now. Not day-old rolls or pantry sugar cookies. I had recipes. My own ones. I used to stay up at night testing different fillings and crusts. I wanted a bakery called a Mother's Touch." Leo smiled faintly. "I'd eat at that place." Anna set the flyer on the table. "There's a craft fair in the church basement next Saturday. No vendor fee. Just show up with what you made." Leo's eyes lit up. "So you'll do it?" She hesitated. Her brain launched into panic mode. Where would she get ingredients? What if no one bought anything? What if she failed in front of strangers again? "I don't even have an oven," she muttered. "We have a microwave." "You can't bake with a microwave, Leo." "Then we find someone who'll let you use theirs." He said it so casually, like it was easy, like hope didn't come with a price. She wanted to say no. She almost did. But something in his face, bright, certain, stubborn, pulled her back. So she said yes. And that changed everything. The next few days were chaos. They found a woman at the shelter, Marla, who ran the meal prep program, who agreed to let Anna use the kitchen during off hours. She gave her 3 hours between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Friday. Anna thanked her like she'd just given her $100,000. She spent every spare minute digging through old notebooks, rereading recipes she hadn't seen in a decade. She borrowed measuring cups from another resident and traded pantry points for flour and sugar. She stitched together plastic bags to make a makeshift pastry piping sleeve. Every single item was begged, borrowed, or salvaged. Leo was her assistant, her cheerleader, and her delivery runner. He stayed up late writing labels for each item in his neatest handwriting. Chocolate swirl crumble, made with love. Lemon butter shortcake, no preservatives, just patience. Sweet milk bread, soft as a hug. Anna laughed when she saw them. "You're too much." Branding, Leo said. "People like emotion." She almost cried. The morning of the fair, they woke up before the sun. Leo helped carry the box of pastries, only 12 items total, carefully wrapped in plastic, placed inside a cardboard crate donated by the food pantry. Anna kept glancing inside. Like the muffins might melt before she got there. The church basement smelled like wet coats and coffee. Other vendors were already setting up, whereupon hats, candles, handmade earrings. Anna found a small table in the far corner and laid out her offerings. She didn't have a sign. She didn't have tablecloths or display stands. Just her food, just her hands, just her fear. She didn't expect to sell anything. She didn't expect anyone to stop. She just wanted to say she tried. But within the first hour, a woman in a red coat tasted the lemon shortcake and blinked twice. "You made this?" Anna nodded. "It's incredible," the woman said. "Can I buy 3 more?" Anna's fingers shook as she took the crumpled bills. The next customer came because she smelled the cinnamon from across the room. Then another, and another. By noon, the box was empty. Every single pastry gone. She stood behind the empty table, stunned, while Leo beamed beside her. "Told you." That night, they celebrated with 2 slices of grocery store pizza and a can of orange soda. Anna insisted they split it evenly, even though Leo tried to give her the bigger half. "Two mothers touch," he said, holding up his cup. Anna smiled and tapped his. "To the one person who never stopped believing in me." That single moment, 12 pastries, $22 in hand, and a table full of nothing was the beginning. Not of a business, not of fame or fortune, but of something more important, of remembering who she used to be and deciding she wasn't done being her yet. When Anna sold out at the church basement craft fair, she didn't tell anyone at the shelter, not out of pride, and not out of fear someone would ask for a cut. She kept it to herself because she still didn't believe it had happened. 12 pastries, $22, a moment where she felt like someone again. But dreams don't grow in silence, and Leo Ever the Believer was already planning the next step. Before she had even washed the baking pans, "You need to go online," he said the very next morning, while they sat at the breakfast table picking at cold cereal with cracked spoons. "Online?" Anna blinked. "With what, Leo?" "We don't even have a computer." We have the school library, he answered. And my account. I can help set it up. A page, a name, pictures. I'll post them on the school bulletin too. Maybe even print flyers. All we need is a name. She didn't hesitate. A mother's touch. He smiled wide. That afternoon, while Anna went to work her evening shift, Leo borrowed a Chromebook from his teacher and stayed behind after class. He created a simple page, uploaded the 3 blurry photos he took from the fair, wrote the bio from his heart, small batch pastries, baked with love by a mother who never gave up. Orders open weekends only. No one noticed at first. Then someone shared the link on the school's parents group. A mom from the PTA placed an order for 2 lemon shortcakes. Then a teacher from the 4th grade asked for cinnamon rolls. Then a counselor requested a birthday tart for her niece. And just like that, Anna had orders. Real ones. She used the community kitchen at dawn, rushed through cleanup before her janitor shift, folded boxes out of scrap cardboard, handwrote thank you notes with crooked hearts for the first time in years. She worked for something that didn't drain her soul. But success, however small, didn't come quietly. It came with stares. Whispers. Judgments wrapped in polite smiles. She's still just the janitor, someone muttered once in the teacher's lounge. Now she's a baker too. What's next? President. Anna pretended not to hear, but she heard everything. She noticed when 2 teachers chuckled at her flour-stained uniform, when a mom dropped off her son and said loudly in the hallway, "I'd never let my kid eat food from someone who cleans toilets." She didn't respond. She just smiled, that tired smile women wear when they've survived too much to argue with ignorance. But inside, she felt it. The heat, the sting, the voice that whispered, "They're right. You don't belong here." Every night, that voice crept in as she packed Leo's lunch. Every morning, it sat beside her as she stirred batter and taped labels onto boxes. But then she'd look at Leo. At his drawings of bakery logos, his little hand-painted sign taped to their bedroom wall, his quiet pride when he handed off a box. At school with the words, "My mom made this," and she kept going. One pastry at a time, one delivery at a time, one bruise of doubt layered with one stubborn spoonful of hope. The week she received 10 orders, she didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. She burned her wrist on the oven rack, broke 2 cupcakes carrying them in the rain, missed her lunch break cleaning up vomit in the boys' restroom. But when Leo presented her with a used apron he bought for 50 cents at a thrift store, the words "Bake the World Better" scrawled across the front, she cried in the shelter hallway, holding it to her chest like a trophy. Still, some part of her wondered if this tiny momentum could last. Until the letter came. A printed envelope addressed to A. Flores, a mother's touch. Inside, a handwritten note. "Dear Anna, I bought one of your lemon tarts last week. I had a horrible day work, divorce stuff, bills, and your pastry made me cry. Not because it was sweet, but because it reminded me of my mom. Thank you. Please don't stop." Tonya R. Anna read it 5 times before folding it carefully and placing it in her pocket. That night, she taped it to the wall above her bed. That was the night she started believing, for real. But Relief didn't pay rent, and the shelter announced it would close their family floor for repairs in 3 weeks. Honor had no idea where they'd go. She had $34 in savings. Still not enough. Not even close. But now she had something else. Orders, customers, a name, a purpose. And that was the first time Honor looked at herself in the mirror and didn't see a janitor who mopped floors in silence. She saw a mother who built something from nothing, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Not the city, not her job, not the shame the world tried to lace around her apron strings. She had fire, and fire keeps burning, especially when you've got someone to protect. The elevator smelled the same. That strange mix of coffee, floor wax, and perfume that reminded Honor of fluorescent lights and forced smiles. The buttons still stuck when you pressed them too hard. The doors still groaned open like they were carrying secrets. It had been 11 years since she last stood in that building. 11 years since she was thrown out of that tiny office on the 3rd floor, with a toddler in one hand and a box of her failed bakery paperwork in the other. She remembered the sound of the security guard's voice telling her, "You can't stay here crying. Lady, you're blocking the hallway." She hadn't cried in front of anyone since. Now, here she was again. Same elevator, same floor, same. Fear curled in her stomach like smoke. But this time, her hands weren't empty. They held a folder. Inside, a proposal, a contract, a deal, and the name a mother's touch printed neatly across the top. The building hadn't changed. Still gray walls, still glass doors, still people in suits walking too fast. But Honor had changed. Not on the outside. She still wore her thrift store heels and carried the same stitched-together tote bag, but something in her walk was different now. Not pride exactly, more like presence, a quiet refusal to shrink. It started 2 weeks before, when one of her online customers emailed her, "Hey Honor, the building where I work is renovating the cafe space on the lobby floor. They're looking for vendors to rotate in and offer lunch or snacks. Nothing fancy, just honest food. I told them about you. Hope that's okay?" She had stared at the email for an hour, then said yes, then panicked for 6 days straight. But Leo had printed her menu, helped her edit the pricing, brought her water during every planning session. And when she told him she wasn't sure she could do this, he said, "Mom, you already survived worse than this building. You cleaned worse than any of these people will ever step on." So now, here she stood. Lobby, front desk. A man with a lanyard looked up from his tablet. Name, Honor Flores. He tapped. Looked surprised. "You're the baker." "Yes." He stared at her for a second longer than polite. She stared back. "Go on up. They're expecting you." She rode the elevator with 3 other people. None of them looked at her, but she didn't care. Her hand clutched the contract. Her heart beat so loud she thought the others might hear it. When she stepped off on the 3rd floor, she saw the conference room, glass walls, cold chairs, fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. A woman greeted her. Young, efficient, expensive shoes. "Hi, Honor. Thanks for coming. Please have a seat." Honor sat. They asked questions about volume, production, packaging, delivery. Honor answered everyone. Steady and clear. She told them she baked by hand, that she had a part-time helpers now, that everything was made from scratch, that she didn't use preservatives, that every tart had a name, every loaf had a story. They nodded, scribbled notes, whispered between each other. Then the woman said, "We'd like to do a 3-month trial. Starting next week, you'll have Tuesdays and Thursdays. Lobby cafe, 11 to 2. Anna's throat closed up. "Are you sure?" The woman smiled. "We've tried for vendors. None of them made anything people talked about. Yours has heart." Anna left the building shaking. Not from nerves, but from release. From the 11 years of swallowed pride, the silent humiliation, the cold bathrooms and dirty mop handles, the pitying glances and ignored greetings. Now she was coming back, not to beg, but to serve. She told Leo that night. He screamed loud enough to scare the neighbor in the next room. They celebrated with $4 ice cream bars and a candle Honor pulled from the bottom of her bag. To returning stronger, Leo said, raising his. To never returning smaller, Honor added. The night before her first lobby shift, she didn't sleep. She baked until dawn. Tarts, buns, cakes, and soft rolls wrapped in parchment with handwritten labels. She wore her apron like armor, the one Leo gave her months ago. Bake the world better. When she arrived at the building, people were already lining up. She set up the table with shaking hands. But when the first customer took a bite and smiled, everything stilled. She belonged there. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she brought something no one else could. Something made with survival, with memory, with love. At noon, a man in a suit approached. Honor recognized him. Same gray hair, same walk, same voice. "You're the baker?" he asked. "Yes." He squinted. "You used to be here, right?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I used to clean the restrooms on the 5th floor. You once asked me not to mop while you were on a call." He blinked, stiffened. "Ah, well, looks like you've, moved up." She didn't smile. She didn't answer. She handed him a lemon tart and moved to the next customer. Because she didn't come to impress him. She came for the woman who'd emailed her. The man who said her food reminded him of home. The young intern who whispered, "My mom used to make bread like this." Thank you. Honor didn't need applause. She needed impact. And that day, she fed 42 people. Sold out by 1:30 p.m. Walked out of the building with $312 and a spine straighter than any hallway she'd ever scrubbed. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Plain envelope, no logo, just her name, handwritten across the front like a quiet dare. Honor Flores, a mother's touch, opened it slowly, not out of fear, but because life had trained her to expect bad news wrapped in politeness. But this wasn't bad news. It was an opportunity. The property management company that owned the office building, the one where she now sold pastries twice a week, had decided to sell the property. A full listing would go public in 30 days. But as one of their contracted vendors, Honor had received the notification early. At first, she laughed out loud a sharp sound that startled Leo, who was peeling potatoes in the kitchen corner. "You okay?" he asked. "They're selling the building," she said, waving the paper in the air. "What building?" "That building. The one where I used to mop the floors. Where I sell now." He blinked. "So," she shook her head, still grinning. "So they sent me the notice as if I could buy it." Leo tilted his head. "Curious, couldn't you?" The question caught her mid-breath. "Leo," she said, "do you know how much a building like that costs?" He shrugged. "Do you?" She didn't. Not really. But now, she had to find out. That night, Anna sat at the kitchen table long after Leo had gone to bed, her old notebook open, calculator app on her borrowed phone glowing beside her. She made columns: current income, projected sales, loan eligibility, bakery potential. She didn't sleep. By morning, she had 2 pages of notes for numbers crossed out, and a plan that was somewhere between delusion and destiny. She visited the local small business center, took notes, asked questions, met with a banker who barely looked at her but handed her a form anyway, talked to a lawyer who didn't blink when she said her net worth was less than the copier he used. And slowly, day by day, she stitched something together. She wasn't trying to buy a dream anymore. She was buying back her story. The building was overpriced, of course it was, and Anna knew her offer wouldn't be the highest. But it would be the most human. She worked with a non-profit investor who believed in local ownership. She pitched the idea of turning the first floor into a small cafe and community kitchen. She proposed renting the top floor to family-run businesses at reduced rates. She included a letter with her application. 15 years ago, I cleaned your bathrooms. 10 years ago, I was homeless. 5 years ago, I started baking again. Today, I'm offering to buy the place where I was once told I didn't belong. Not because I want revenge, but because I want to prove that stories don't have to end where they start. 3 weeks passed. She didn't tell anyone, not even Leo. She didn't want to say it out loud until it was real. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, while she was kneading dough with cinnamon under her nails, her phone rang. She didn't answer the first time. Or the second, but the third time. She picked it up, flour still on her fingertips, and heard the words, "Ms. Flores, your offer has been accepted." The world stopped moving. She sat down on the floor, not from shock, from weight. The weight of everything she had carried for so long. Alone. She didn't cry. Not yet. She waited until Leo got home. Then she handed him the letter. He read it once, then twice, then whispered, "You own it." She nodded. He dropped his backpack, ran forward, and hugged her so hard she thought her ribs might break. "You did it, Mom. We did it." A month later, she stood at the entrance of the building, her building, with keys in her hand. The same security guard who once told her to leave now held the door open. He didn't recognize her. She didn't remind him. People stared as she walked through the lobby. Same face, different posture. She walked straight to the conference room on the 3rd floor, the same one from her pitch meeting. She set her bag on the table, took out her plans, her contracts, her vision, and then she went to the 5th floor. The one she used to mop. Room by room. She walked through every hallway, touched the doors she once wiped fingerprints from, ran her fingers across windows she once washed in silence. At the end of the hallway, she stopped. Room 5C, the women's restroom, the place where, years ago, she had collapsed from exhaustion and no one noticed. She opened the door, clean, quiet. She stepped inside, turned around, and closed it gently. Then leaned against the wall and breathed. For a long time, then she whispered, "I'm still here." Not as the janitor. Not as the invisible woman, but as the owner. They told her to sit in the front row, reserved seat, her name written in gold ink. Honor Flores, community guest of honor. She thought it was a mistake. "I just bake," she said quietly to the woman guiding her in. "Not today." The woman smiled. "Today, you're the reason we're all here." The gymnasium was packed. Folding chairs lined up in perfect rows. Balloons bouncing from the ceiling. A podium wrapped in silver tinsel. A banner hung above it all. Lincoln Middle School graduation. Class of 2030 for Leo was in the third row from the front, second seat from the right. He wore a shirt and tie he borrowed from a friend, sleeves a little too long, collar too tight. He looked nervous. Anna's hands trembled in her lap. She had spent the whole morning trying to stay calm, ironing her blouse twice, redoing her braid 3 times, applying the same shade of lipstick she used when she baked her first cake at the shelter years ago. But nothing could prepare her for the moment her son would graduate. The boy who once hid behind her in food pantry lines, who read books instead of eating lunch, who apologized for being hungry. Now, he sat tall, shoulders straight, hands folded, eyes forward. The ceremony began. Principal, applause, speeches, awards. Then the microphone squeaked, and the guidance counselor stepped up. Every year, we ask one student to give a reflection speech. This year, that student is Leo Flores. Honor froze. No one told her. She turned to the woman beside her. "Did you know?" The woman smiled. "He insisted we keep it a surprise." Leo walked slowly to the stage, not nervous now, calm, focused. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat, and began. "Good morning. My name is Leo Flores. I want to start by thanking my teachers, my friends, and everyone who helped us reach this day. But most of all, I want to thank someone who's not just part of my story. She is my story." The audience stilled. Anna gripped the edges of her seat. "When I was 9, I didn't always have a bed, or new clothes, or a home. But I had a mother who gave me something better. A mother who cleaned floors all night and still packed my lunch before school. A mother who was told she wasn't enough, too poor, too tired, too invisible, and proved them all wrong. She didn't have money, but she gave me a vision. She didn't have time, but she gave me her last minutes. And when I was ashamed of who we were, she never stopped loving me." A hush fell over the room. She now owns the building where she used to clean bathrooms. She built a bakery from nothing but her hands and her heart. She gave this city more than pastries. She gave it a reason to believe in second chances. Anna's throat clenched. She tried not to cry, but she couldn't stop it. The tears came quietly, hot and full. She wiped them quickly, but they kept falling. She didn't just raise me. She raised a dream. And everything I do from here on out will carry her name. Leo paused, looked at her. Mom, please come up here. The audience turned. She froze. He means you. The woman whispered beside her. Anna stood slowly. Her knees shook. Her steps unsteady. She climbed the stairs to the stage, one hand on the rail, the other pressed to her chest. Leo met her halfway. He took her hand. You spent your life standing behind me. He whispered, just this once, stand beside me. The room erupted in applause. She didn't hear any of it. All she heard was the sound of her son calling her forward. And all she saw was the boy she once fed under flickering shelter lights, now taller than her, holding her hand as if she were the one who needed strength. He handed her a small box. Inside, a necklace, a silver pendant engraved with 5 words. Just a janitor? Watch me. She laughed, then cried harder. Not the kind of tears that ache, the kind that release, the kind that wash away the years. That night, after the ceremony, people lined up to hug her, to shake her hand, to say thank you, and we know your story, and you gave us hope. She didn't know what to say. So she just smiled and held Leo's hand the whole way home.